Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of the How to Make Your Very Own Weapon mod little series that we're doing. Now, last time we talked about a lot of the creation kit setup. I know it was a bit of a boring episode, but it is all very, very necessary stuff to get yourself a working weapon. And if you remember, we were working on a Frommer stop based on the animations of the Deliverer. Now, today we're going to focus on getting an actual model in-game. Specifically, this tutorial is going to be focused on using Blender, so if you are using 3ds Max, most of the stuff should still apply, but again, this is specifically focused on the Blender workflow. So this isn't going to be teaching you how to actually model the weapon. You know, this is not a Blender tutorial, but rather a modding tutorial on how to get the object from Blender and into the game. So if you're already struggling with how to model in Blender, perhaps check out some different Blender tutorials first. That being said, for those of you who have already completed your model, hence why this video took so long to get out, because I actually needed to model all the parts of the Frommer, this is where we can start beginning. But if you haven't started your model, I can at least give you some tips on how to make your model appropriate for Fallout 4 modding. And with that, I'm going to have the Deliverer up on screen, as you can see in Nifskope. And it is going to be a little bit different from what you normally see in game. As you can see, it is missing its magazine, its barrel, and its grips, and that's because that's how weapons work in Fallout. They are segmented into pieces. So they're broken down into several different categories. First of all is the actual attachments. So when you make the Deliverer and you make a receiver, this is the receiver, all of what you see on screen here. And then other parts that you would attach at the workbench, like a barrel, magazine, or grip, will be different nifs entirely. And from there, they're broken down even further, especially when it comes to receivers. As you can see, when I click on an object, that's not the whole thing. The green selected piece down here is the frame, which is the actual receiver part. Then we also have all of the moving parts for the animation, like the trigger, the hammer, and the slide are all different pieces, and we even have a safety, though I don't know that it's actually used in the animation, but it is still there. So it's important to note that all of these things are separated because that's how you're going to need to make your model. You need to ensure that your slide, frame, trigger, hammer are all different pieces. Now, that may not apply to your weapon per se, but it is important to know which pieces actually move. For example, on the Deliverer, the most prominent moving part is the slide, so we just need to make sure that our slide is a separate piece from the frame, and the same goes for our barrels, grips, etc. But go ahead and model it all before you begin the next step. Now then, with that little introduction out of the way, for the purposes of today's video, you're going to need a couple of programs, and the first of which, of course, is going to be Blender, but I'm assuming you already have that down. You're also going to need Nifskope, which is what I am using here. This is where we can actually mess with the nifs and the in-game files. You're going to need the program Outfit Studio, which is how we're going to convert our objects into a nif for the game. And then you may also want the Bethesda Archive Extractor so you can get your hands on the original nifs themselves, which is how I'm looking at this here. I'll have links and instructions to all of those down in the description below, and once you've got them all set up, you can go ahead and begin with the next part. Now then, that we've seen our Deliverer in-game, we can go ahead and take a look at my Frommer model in Blender. And as you can see, it's pretty much complete. And I've gone ahead and added all of the accessories as well, so you can have things like different scopes and night vision scopes, longer scopes, recon scopes. Those are the main things I'm modeling, as well as longer barrels, extended barrels, fun stuff like that. And then I may use a couple of vanilla assets for some of the different muzzle devices and such. Now, one thing that's really important, again, is that your pieces are separate. So this model here is multiple parts. Here is the main frame, the trigger, the hammer, the slide, which interestingly enough for the Frommer is actually internal rather than on the outside like the Deliverer. And when it moves, it's going to move like that. And then I believe that's it for the main part of the actual receiver nif. I also do have a barrel, and I have yet to make magazines, but those will come with time. Now then, one thing that's important to note is that this is going to line up with the animation, so it is a good idea to convert your original nif into a 3D object, just so you can compare. And a good thing to do is to press 3 here on Blender so we can line it up from the side, and this is for the most part going to work. Our hands are going to slide into just about every part here pretty nicely, and the character is going to grab onto the slide, and that's all that really matters. From there, we can go ahead and not worry about that. Let's talk about how to actually get this out of the game. Now, there are a few steps to make sure that your model is ready first, because you can't just send it exactly like it is. First of all, we want to clean up some of the geometry. As you can see, there are a whole bunch of lines and jagged edges, and that's just because we're working in a 3D modeling program, but there's an easy way to get rid of all of that using some fun modifiers in Blender. Now, first of all, if we want to get rid of these jagged lines, you can right-click after selecting that particular model and click Shade Smooth, and you'll see that it gets rid of all of the lines, though there is some weird shading effects going on. From there, you're going to want to head over to the modifier section, which is this little blue wrench on the side here, and then we're going to click Add Modifier, and we're going to look for Edge Split. And then as you can see, that cleans everything up very, very nice. No more lines. Everything is nice and smooth, and the sharp edges are sharp. And you can play around with the angle if you want things to be sharper or smoother. 30 is typically a pretty safe bet, but you can play around with this as needed. Now, don't do this immediately during the model. I would say model everything first before you add on an edge split, as it is going to change up some of the geometry and add different seams and things along the sharp edges. But once you are for sure about to be done, go ahead and click on the little down arrow and click Apply. And now it is cemented like that. It's going to look just like this. And you're going to want to do that to all of your different parts. Once you've got your edge split added, there is one more step that we need to do to get this thing ready for the game, and that is to triangulate it. If we look at the vertices, you'll notice that everything is made mostly out of squares or square-like shapes, but what we need it to be is triangles, because video games like triangles for their polys. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it back into object mode, and we're going to go to that modifier section once again and click the triangulate button, and then make sure that it's set to shortest diagonal, and make sure that minimum vertices is 4, and then we'll go ahead and click apply. And then if we head back into looking at our vertices, you'll see that everything has a lot more lines now, turning every single shape on this into a triangle so that the game can actually read it, and the textures are going to be real nice. Now then, from there, there are still a couple more steps, and this specifically has to do with texturing, but it has to be done now and not later, because you need to set up the UV maps for when we actually get to the texturing step. So one thing I like to do here is click Control A and then hit Scale. And this is going to scale all of our UV lines to be the proper size. And then from here, we can go to the UV editing section here. Now, there are definitely better ways to go about this, and I can send you some different tutorials on better UV creation. But if you're trying to do it fast and dirty, one way to do it is to set it to the ability to see through here. We're going to select all these vertices, and you can see the UV on the left is messy. But what we can do is hit UV, Smart UV Project, and the angle limit by default is 66, and that one is pretty all right. We'll go ahead and click OK and see what it looks like. And you'll see here, we have my UVs broken up pretty nicely. We have the main frame right here, and then a lot of the different parts. There's the trigger guard. You can kind of actually identify most of the pieces. But if this is not your thing, and you want to place it manually, you can do that as well. Again, there definitely are much better ways, but it takes a lot more time. So if you're just trying to get this out quick and you're not too keen on having amazing texture quality, this is an easy, fast way to do it. Otherwise, I would say placing everything by hand is going to give you a lot better of a result. Once that's done though, and this is applied, this object is ready. So we're going to head back over to the modeling section, and my frame is done. I still need to do this to all of the other parts of the weapon, like the trigger and the different scopes that I've made. But the frame, at the very least, is done. From there, we're going to export this bad boy so that we can make it into a nif. We're going to hit File and Export, and we're going to make it into a wavefront object. We need to make sure that it is set to Selection Only, and you're going to export this thing wherever it is that you're going to keep these models for safekeeping. Make sure to name it something that is identifiable. So I'm going to name mine Frommer_receiver. And since there are multiple parts of my receiver, I'm going to also give it another underscore frame, as this is the frame of the weapon. And then we'll go ahead and export it, and the object is done. Go ahead and repeat this process for all of your other parts, at the very least for the moving parts of the receiver, and you can work on your attachments later in the attachment section of the video, or you can get it all done now. It's really up to you. Now then, while we are technically done in Blender, there is actually one more step that I like to do that is going to save us some time later. Chances are that when you created your object, it's not actually lined up where it's going to be in Nifskope. For example, here is the part that we just exported, which is just the frame. And now I'm going to import the version of the deliverer straight out of Nifskope, and you'll see that they look nothing alike. So in order for my gun to look like this in Nifskope, it needs to be rotated and positioned in the exact same spot as the deliverer here. So what we're going to do is actually do that. For starters, we need to rotate it 180 degrees that way using our rotate tool, which I just goofed up a little bit. Go ahead and set that to 180, and then this one's going to go to 270 or -90, depending on who you are. And then we're going to need to make sure that all of the parts are lined up nice and correctly. Now let's go ahead and adjust it. I think it's about right here or so. I think that's where I was going to put it. It might be like right here. There. We can always adjust as necessary in Nifskope. Once we see the animations, it'll be very clear if we need to adjust things more. But getting it at least close and then re-exporting it with this new position is going to make it so that when you import this object into Nifskope, it's pretty much going to be exactly where you want it to be. Go ahead and do this with all of the different parts of your weapon, but keep in mind where those parts are going. So for me, I'm going to want to line up this frame, the trigger, the hammer, and the slide all with this receiver part. If you're going to line up a barrel, make sure you line up the barrel with another barrel attachment so that you can get the nodes correct. That way they attach where they're supposed to attach. All right, with that, let's go ahead and re-export this guy right back to where he was. Make sure that you have it set to selection only, and we'll go ahead and put him right here. And we are good to go. All right, now once you've gotten all of your models exported and everything is triangulated and their UVs are all set up nice, it is time for make these things into actual nifs. Now, again, since we never really explained it, the nif is the actual model that the game uses. This is going to help it route all of the textures and add on all of the little animation nodes and help things line up in game. So they are a very, very important part of the process. And messing this up will no doubt cause problems for you in the future. So let's just make sure to take it slow. And if ever there is a problem, always recheck your nif to make sure nothing is messed up. Now, in order to make it into a nif, we're going to use the program Outfit Studio, which is typically used to modify outfits. However, it does have one nice feature, which is the ability to drag in an object. We'll go ahead and import it. And then from here, we can see our object in game. We can check to make sure the model looks clean, and everything does in fact look really, really nice. And then from there, we're going to click File, Export to NIF, and then we're going to set where you want your NIF path to go. Now, this isn't the final version of the NIF, so send it to a nice holding place for now, and we're going to grab it again later. Once you've done that, go ahead and do it with the rest of the pieces that you're going to be needing for the next section. Again, for now, we're just starting with the frame, so I'm going to finish this up with the trigger, the hammer, and the slide. Or would it be a bolt? I don't really know. The Frommer's weird, and I'm not good with that kind of stuff. Alright, now once you have all of these converted into nifs, you should have a folder that looks something like this, where we have our different .nif files. So we're going to go ahead and drag that off to the side, and we are going to need these later. You're also going to now want to open up Nifskope, and I think this is the first time we've actually opened it up for the purposes of this tutorial, aside from looking at the deliverer earlier. Now you're going to want two different windows open, one of which is going to have the original nif that you're going to be working with. So in this case, it'll be the covert sidearm _1 nif for me, which is the deliverer receiver. Now make sure that you grab the nif that says _1, as that is the playable one that has all of the working animations and fun stuff like that. Now then, we're going to go ahead and grab our first nif. I'm going to grab the frame for starters and put it into our side tab over here. As you can see, it is just our nice little frame. And what we're going to want to do is import all of the new nifs that we just created into the old nif in the correct spots. So we're going to grab the frame here, and find where that is. And as we can see, it's at the very bottom in this category here. There it is. So what we're going to do is go to our new nif, right click on the object or on to the branch itself. We're going to click block and copy branch. And then we're going to head over here, find the category that this is in. As we can see, it is in the 30-second node. We're going to right click on that node, click block, and click paste branch. Now, sometimes this might happen, and it has to do with the clamp sizing. I intentionally left it not fixed so I can show you guys how to fix it if it happens to you. You can see that this is much too large. Sometimes it comes in at 10 times the size it needs to be, so you're going to right click and click transform, edit, and give it a nice 0.1 on the scale. And you can see that now it is right where we want it. You can actually change the clamp size of things so that they come in properly, but just in case that happens to you, now you know what to do with it. Now, there are a couple of other steps that we can do to fix things. As you can see, it looks like we are off to the side a little bit. Even though we did our best to make sure things will be in the right place in Blender, it doesn't always work out quite how we want. So we will have to do some adjusting. So you're going to right click on your object again, use the transform tool, and just get it into place. So it looks like in order for this thing to line up correctly, we're going to need to move it over a little bit in the negative direction, probably about 0.5 or so, maybe a little less. This can take some time, so by all means, take the time that you need to do it correctly until it is lined up exactly where you want it. All right, so I think that's good and lined up. And from there, what I can do is grab the original frame, which is down there, and I want to get rid of that. And what you're going to do is right click on said frame. You're going to hit the block, and you need to make sure that you hit remove branch. Not just remove, but the branch itself, as that is going to be including the textures and everything else underneath that. We want to get rid of all of it. So we're going to hit remove branch, and it's going to be gone. And now we have our new frame in its place. Now we need to do the same thing with the other pieces. Now I'm going to go ahead and show those as well because the process is always slightly different. We're going to grab our branch, and now we're going to find where the hammer is located. We're going to click on it, and we'll see that it is under this 9 node here, which is under actually the entire weapon, it looks like, which is pretty interesting. I don't think it's tied to any animation in particular. So we're going to go ahead and paste it there as well. Yeah, so because it is not tied to any particular animation, we're actually just going to click on this 9 node as a whole and click block and paste branch. And then we can move it into position. Now again, we're going to need to transform that to be 0.1. And it is nice and in place right where we want it, except you'll notice again that it is off to the side a little bit. So what we can actually do is we can copy our transform from our frame that we already did. Or actually, did that wrong. We're going to right click on the frame that we already did, transform and copy, and then right click, transform and paste. And now it is exactly where it should be because it already has the transform data that we did to the frame. It's going to save you a whole lot of time for that part. Now then we can go ahead and move on to the slide, which is going to be a bit different because it is tied to a different node. So things I bet you aren't going to line up exactly how we want. So this one is in its own node, which is node number 5 here. We're going to go ahead and paste it in there. Give it the good old 10% transform. And yeah, it's in a way different spot. Now we can go ahead and copy our transform data over just to get it lined up on the x-axis, but we are going to have to move it into place. At the very least, though, we can move or remove the slide that is in place from the old stuff. So we're going to get rid of that safety lever. We don't need that. We don't need this, and we don't need this. We can go ahead and transform this into place without any stuff getting in the way. What's really cool too, and I haven't really talked about it because I am making everything from scratch here, is you can also just use pieces you like. If you notice that trigger looks like it's in a really good spot, I myself did make my own trigger as the Frommer has its own different style of trigger, but you can reuse vanilla assets like that if you don't want to have to go through the process of remodeling absolutely everything. Now then, I'm going to go ahead and line this up. This might take a second, so I'll go ahead and fast forward through it. All right, that looks like it's good and in place, and That gives us an almost done version of our Frommer. The last thing we need to do is put that trigger in place, and we'll go ahead and copy that over. I believe this is not tied to an animation, and I would be correct. It is just a separate node. So we can actually just get rid of that and paste in our new one at the base, and then give it the good old transform treatment with a 0.1. Actually, we don't even need to do that because it's all tied to this. We can copy it over from the frame, go back down to our trigger, and paste it, and there it is. Now we have a pretty functional Frommer receiver. We are missing our grips and our barrel and magazine, but it's pretty much done. The only thing that isn't on here is textures, but we're going to save that for next episode. And everything is good and in place. The textures actually will be done in Nifskope, or at least applying them will be, but we'll do all of that later. The next step is saving our nifs. So we're going to save as. Make sure that you save as and don't overwrite your original. And then save it wherever it is that you are saving your final nifs for this project. Actually, there is one other small thing about organization. Wherever your folder is that you have your mod set up, it needs to be structured as such. You need a folder called materials, a folder called meshes, a folder called textures, and then your actual ESP will not be in a folder whatsoever. And your nifs need to go in this meshes file. Additionally, I would recommend throwing in a subfolder with the name of your weapon. That way you don't confuse it with other stuff. If you use any vanilla assets, shared assets, or anything like that, your own assets are in their own file. That way it's not just sitting around with a bunch of other random vanilla parts. Then from there, you save your nif as such. You can even do further categorization by adding even more folders if you want it to be separated by the frame, the receiver, the bolt, the everything be different. You could do that, but it's not that necessary. But I would recommend at least setting up these two folders, but you definitely need it set up like this for your mod to function and for the game to read the files correctly. All right, now then it is time to head into the CK. Go ahead and get your files over to where you can actually work on them. If you're doing it manually, go ahead and drop in your new mesh material and texture folder along with that ESP into your Fallout 4 data directory. Or if you're using MO2 like me, you can package it up into a zip file and turn it into a mod that you can then edit from the CK. However you need to do it to get your files in-game, go ahead and do that so that we can edit our ESP. Now, I've already got mine loaded up in the CK here. Go ahead and get yours as well. And let's open up your weapon that we created in the first episode, as there's some stuff we're going to have to mess with. Now, in order to actually get these files in-game, we're going to need to add them to the weapon as attachments for the models to actually show up. But there is a bit of a problem with that, which is the fact that our weapon is currently using the attachments of the original weapon we based it off of. As you can see, when we open up my Frommer, it looks like the Deliverer. Now, while I will have a video dedicated to attachments, we are going to have to do some of that work here, as it is completely necessary in order to get everything working. Now, if we look at our weapon and we go over to the keyword section, we will find a very important keyword that says MA_deliverer, and this is called a mod association. This associates the weapon to take mods from the deliverer. Pretty self-explanatory. We need it to take mods from our weapon. So we're going to go ahead and close this and make our own association keyword. What we're going to do is we're going to open up our search bar here. Actually, I'll do it in my second object window, and we'll type in MA_, I believe it's deliverer is what it was called. It actually doesn't matter what we grab, as long as we grab a mod association. We're going to double click it, and we're going to make our own. You could make a new keyword entirely, rather than just editing the ID of an existing one, but it is up to you. Just make sure that your type down here has mod association. We're going to click OK. It's going to save as a new ID. And now we have made our very own Frommer mod association. And now we're going to apply that to our Frommer stop. We're going to double click it. We're going to wait for it to open up, as those weapons do take a while to show up in the CK. Once it is here, we're going to go to the mod association deliver, and we're going to delete that. And we're going to add in a new keyword, which is ours. And we're going to type in MA_from is mine, and yours is whatever you named it. And then we're going to click OK, and it is saved. So now our Frommer will take parts from our gun and not the deliverer. Now what we have to do is start making our very own attachments. And luckily, we can just take existing attachments from the weapon we're basing it off of, and work from there. So I'm going to go to deliverer, and it's going to have a bunch of attachments here. So what we need to really grab are the miscmods, the mods, and the comods. The miscmods aren't entirely necessary, but if you want a fully complete mod with its own droppable items, then I would recommend making them. For starters, let's do the receiver. So we're going to look for the miscmod underscore deliver receiver standard. Whatever weapon you're working on, just grab the standard version of its receiver, grab the miscmod, and you can change out the information. So what we need to go do is replace deliverer in the ID with Frommer, or whatever the name of your weapon is, and I'll leave the rest as this is going to be the standard receiver. And I'm going to do it right here as well. And then you can change the value to whatever you want. I like making mine 1, as the value here actually determines the order in which these items will appear in the weapons workbench, and it's just easier to make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rather than memorizing some arbitrary number set. It does lower the value of your parts, but that doesn't really matter to me. Go ahead and we will then go ahead and click OK and create the new form. And over on our left, you see that I have a new miscmod. Very cool. Now we need to make the mod itself, and this is where the magic happens. This is what is actually going to change the weapon and change how it looks and performs, everything about it. So underneath the miscmod, we see mod underscore receiver underscore standard. We're going to open that one up, and we're going to make our mod. Same as before, come up here and replace deliverer with your weapon's name. Now, the name itself doesn't actually have the weapon in it, because this is how it appears in the weapons workbench, which is just standard receiver. I will leave that the same. And then we can actually change out the model, all that stuff that we just worked on. So we're going to click edit here, and you'll see there is the frame for the actual deliverer. And then we can click edit and throw in ours. Now, this is why you created that folder earlier for your meshes. There is Frommer. Open that up, open up our receiver, click OK, and there is our Frommer frame. Very cool. And it has all of our pieces with the trigger, the slide, the hammer, all of that stuff. We're going to click OK. The description I'm going to leave as is. For this section here, this dropdown, it says miscmod deliverer. We need to route that to the miscmod we just created, which is for the Frommer. So we're just going to scroll down a little bit, and there it is. Miscmod Frommer receiver standard. And then right here, it has mod association deliverer. Well, we need to get rid of that because we don't want the deliverer to have our new attachment. We want our gun to have the new attachment. So we'll add the mod association for the Frommer. In terms of weight, I'm going to leave it the same, value the same, and keywords has receiver standard. I'm going to leave the same as well. And we're going to click OK, and we'll save it there. And now we have our new mod. And there is one more step, which is to create the omod. The omod helps you actually add this attachment in the weapons workbench. So let's grab the comod for the standard receiver, open it up. This one will take just a second to load up. And then once it's there, same as before, replace deliverer with your weapon's name. And then over here where it says created mod, we have the object of the deliverer. I want that to be for the Frommer. Make sure that it is mod and not miscmod. That is very important, and it will make it so that it doesn't show up in game. So mod underscore weapon underscore yada yada. And then from here, you can change out the attachments and stuff, but we'll cover that in more details in the attachment section of the series. Go ahead and click OK, create the new object. And now that is all set up, and you can now craft that attachment at a weapons workbench in game. But we need to actually get that onto the weapon. So let's go ahead and make these attachments like we just did, the miscmod, mod, and comod for all of the attachments that you want to throw on, and then we can head into the weapon itself. Being as I've only done the receiver, I'll just stick with the receiver for now. Now what we're going to be setting up is known as the weapon object template. From here, up at the top, we see a section called Object Template. This determines what modifications the weapon actually spawns with. So as you see, even though we changed out the receiver, our weapon still looks like a deliverer, and that's because of the mod templates. Now, there are a handful of mod templates here already, and what we're going to do for the purposes of my Frommer is get rid of them completely because we don't want them. You can make your own templates, and what they will do is make it so the weapon can spawn with different variations. So if you wanted it to spawn with a suppressor or a reflex sight or whatever, you can have different templates set up. But by default, you probably want one with all of the basic attachments. So now we only have the default template set up, and as you can see, it has a bunch of deliverer parts here in the object modifications. Well, for the receiver, I'm going to change that out for my receiver, and what you can do here in this filter is just type in the name of yours, so only your stuff pops up. I'm going to type in Frommer, and there we have the Frommer receiver. I'm going to click on that and click Apply, and if we open up the template again, we should see our Frommer in place of the deliverer. And there it is. Now, this still has the deliverer parts like the magazine, the grip, and the barrel here. And we can just remove those entirely. Or if you have all of your parts set up, you can just swap them out like we just did for the receiver by clicking on the drop down and moving them around. I haven't set up my barrel and everything yet, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Let's go ahead and save this as it is and click File, Save to our ESP. And make sure that you do save it and that you have backup copies so you don't lose your mod. And let's go ahead and launch the game and see if our model is actually there. All right, now that we are in game, let's go ahead and spawn this thing in so we can check it out. Again, this isn't entirely necessary, but it helps to make sure that everything's lined up. And it looks like I forgot to take away that featured item keyword, so I'll need to remember that for next time. But as we can see, the model's nice and there, but that's not what we're here to see. Let's see if it all actually works. Make sure the animations all play correctly. The slide should move back and forth as we shoot. And it looks like it does work. The iron sights are nice and lined up. Everything's looking good in first person. Now, another thing I'd recommend is grabbing the camera mod so that in third person you can really go and check it all out. And it looks like the trigger is nice. The finger's where it's supposed to be. The only thing I don't like is it looks like the hammer clips just a little bit with the glove, and that's a very easy minor adjustment to make, so I can tweak that as necessary. But for you guys, your model is now in game, and you should be able to tweak it and mess with it until the next episode. Speaking of which, the next episode is going to cover textures, not how to make them, but how to get them from Substance Painter into Fallout 4. Now, there are a handful of steps, and you may be using something like Photoshop or GIMP, for which I can leave some other really nice tutorials, but we'll just have to see about that when we get there. Until then, I hope this video series is helping you guys out, and I hope it's helping your modding endeavors. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to drop a rating, subscribe if you haven't already for more videos just like this, and stay tuned for future tutorial episodes so you can get your own mod in-game. Can't wait to see you guys make, and be sure to send it over on the Discord so I can take a look. With that, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace!